think about the MMA fighters and how much they make, because, you can make the case that they're making, on average what your uncle was making back in the day. And one of the things that Mark Hunt was talking about was an association of sorts. Do you think we will ever see that in MMA, or is the sport too splintered?
It's hard to imagine. Forming a union, people act like it's sophisticated. It's not. It's very simple. You get the guys together, and you can do it by a show of hands. They can just raise their vote, and there you've got it. But as far as getting an association together, let's see what happens. There's one way to do it right now. I mean, your first step, it wouldn't be a union or an association, but if everybody bands together, and you could do it by a group of text messages, right? All the fighters, I got them all in my phone right now, as do you, and they could all just make a pact that we're going to let our contracts run out. That's it. We're going to do nothing more. We're not going to re-sign with one left. We're going to let all of our contracts run out and go back to the table. Now, that's not collective bargaining rights, but that would be a huge step to achieving all of the goals that a union or association would do. You would then be able to go in, sit down, and talk. So this is not a sophisticated or complicated thing. Then if you're on Dana's side of it, Dana always says, look, I don't care if you want to form a union or not. That's up to you guys. That's not my side. I don't go and get the workers to form a union. They got to do that. But if you guys form one, I got to negotiate with somebody. If you want me to do it with your union rep as opposed to you or your manager, go ahead. I toe a line. I'm a business like anybody else. If there's somewhere else, it doesn't seem, everybody keeps saying like this is going to solve all the problems. Like, well, you could collectively come up with some things if guys aren't responsible enough to do it on themselves. And we do have a lot of fighters that don't pay taxes. We do have a lot of fighters that don't go out and get health care. We do have fighters that don't set up retirement and all the way down to vacation for themselves. And you could have a union come in and do it. You could also have some smarter fighters that go, listen, I don't want somebody telling me how to spend my money. And I don't know what side they sit on. It looks like right now the fighters sit on the side of, I'm going to take my money and do whatever I want with it, and however life ends up, it ends up. The union can come in and help you with that, and there's arguments to both sides. If you study the history of unions, it's really pretty fascinating. They did some really great things. I think in some parts the unions might have they might have outlasted themselves, and it's not quite what Hoffa had in mind. But overall, they're the ones that gave us the 40-hour work week, the 8-hour day, child labor laws. The unions historically are very great for this country. Yeah,
I think, again, another fascinating topic. And, I thought T.J. Dillashaw had some really interesting points recently. I think Mark Hunt has some interesting points if you can, weed through the F-bombs and stuff like that. But this is something that, has been talked about for a long time in our sport. The difference is it's never really been talked about by, high-level current UFC fighters. We've heard it from ex-UFC fighters who are still very relevant, but never people under contract who are still, part of the show and climbing the ladder and important players. So, I'm wondering just how far it will go. And, I think it would behoove the fighters to open their eyes and ears a little bit to just see, like, okay, is this better for us? Is it better to collectively bargain? Because I think that there have been a few things that have happened that have sort of forced their hand. The Reebok deal, the USADA deal, the TV deal, those are just, three main ones that, I'd love to see. I'd love to play the sliding doors game and see how those deals would have panned out for the fighters had there have been some kind of association in place.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying there. And fighters get so busy and so tight. It is hard I think it is something where a retired fighter or a manager or somebody like that is going to have to be the one.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't mean to interrupt you. I think this is important to note. I think a lot of the managers in this sport, much love to them, but I think a lot of them are getting a pass here because the fighters are in tunnel vision. The fighters are worried about, training for this guy who's trying to knock off their head. I sympathize with you guys greatly. You have to deal with life, and then you have to deal with going to the gym multiple times a day to prepare for the most grueling athletic endeavor out there. The managers are the ones who are supposed to be looking out for their best interests. The managers are the ones who should have been looking at some of these deals and being like, well, maybe we should. Instead, a lot of them, as you know, try to be buddy-buddy with the promoter and aren't looking out for the best interest of the fighter. And I think now, in hindsight, we need to look back at those moments and say, what were the managers doing as far as working for their client? Were they doing everything possible to work for their client? And I don't know. I don't know if the answer is yes in every case. You get what I'm saying?
I do get what you're saying. And, if somebody wanted to form a union or association, just to build on your thought there, so many people think it's the fighters. Well, there's 556 fighters now under contract. However, there's only 6 managers that run the industry. Instead of thinking the fighters have to do it and get all 556 together or on a Facebook page like Mark Hunt's trying to do, or whatever the idea is, going to court like some other retired guys are doing this whole antitrust deal. If you got those 6 managers in a room together And they're the ones that could then go spawn it out. But again, I don't know that anybody comes out ahead. It's the same pot of money. It's just how you disperse it and how you organize it. You know, do you say, okay, everybody's going to make a little bit less, but now everybody's going to get health care and a little 10% over here for retirement? I just don't know totally how they would do it, and I don't know that at the end of the day it equals any more money. Maybe there's some profit sharing. Maybe everybody gets to be in on the gate and the pay-per-view and all that. I get the arguments. I'm not against it or for it. I'm just saying that there is a lot of moving parts there, and if somebody wanted to do it, it's a hell of a lot easier to do than some people will lead you to believe. I mean, forming a union really is, you get the workers together, show of hands, yay or nay, and you move forward from there. I mean, the workers have a lot of power.
You also need your employer to recognize the union, right? I mean, they can't just be like, no, we're not going to talk to these. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess if you're strength in numbers and you're like, look, we're if you want to run these things, you want these things to happen. If you want, and by the way, it's down to little things. Like they put out this memo that you may have seen where you have to come in, no more than 12% of your, on the Tuesday before your Saturday fight. You can't have more than 12% of your body weight left to cut, right? Did you see this memo that was sent out, or they suggested it? Did you see that?
I heard about it, yeah. Is there an or what attached, Ariel? Like, or what?
Well, no, my question is like, okay, if there was an association involved, like maybe the fighters come together, they talk and they're like, you know what, maybe it should be 15%. Maybe that makes more sense. Maybe we're more comfortable. Demetrius Johnson said, or what? Demetrius Johnson said, there's no way I'm doing that. And what are they really going to do? And I haven't really heard of them, enforcing this, because they said it was going to come into play in July. So here we are, there's only been a few shows, but I think that's an interesting thing. There's a lot of things that come down, and I'm not just talking about like revolutionary stuff, but, I think for the most part, you would be hard pressed to find anyone who has said the association/unions haven't served the NBA, MLB, NHL, NFL players well. I mean, just look at the NBA players and what they've gotten. I know MLB has had some labor issues, but as of late they haven't. NFL as well, NHL as well. But for the most part, I think it has all behooved the players to be united. In our sport, they couldn't be. They're the exact opposite. And I know it's a different kind of sport. I know everyone's individual and you're fighting against each other and all that. But the sport is going down that path. And I really think it would be interesting if they at least looked at it. At the end of the day, it's the fighter's career. I'm just a guy covering the sport, but with some perspective as a sports fan and someone who's able to take a step back and look at the things going on as opposed to training for an upcoming fight. And I think it's now more interesting and relevant than ever.
Yeah, that's true. And the weight thing is the weight thing's a weird thing, and the intention is right. They're trying to help the guys.
Sure. Yeah.
The inadvertent side of it is now a guy just has to stay dehydrated for 4 days longer than he normally would have. I always push back on that. Burt Watson, great guy, friend to you and I. Burt started bringing guys in. He did this on his own. He wasn't asked to do it. He did it on his own. And the very first day, travel day for UFC, if the fight's on Saturday, travel day is Tuesday. And the first thing that you would do when you got there, before you checked in, got your room, put your bag down, Burt would take you to a scale and weigh you in. And then Saturday, the day of, Friday, the day of the weigh-in, you had to then go re-weigh with Burt between 9 and 11. And I always resisted it. And, I respected Burt so much that I did it every time, but I couldn't do it without a chip on my shoulder. And he was always like, hey, you are the only guy that gives me a hard time about this. What's the deal? And I just, as respectfully as I could say, I said, Burt, it's none of your damn business. What I weigh is one step away from telling you my game plan. It is none of your business. I have a contract. I have never missed weight. I have penalties, should I? And it's none of your... And the other side of it is, there's no point, Bert. If I'm 5 pounds underweight, you don't take me to KFC. And if I'm 8 pounds overweight, you don't take me to the sauna.